Okay, so our final speaker this morning, and I've already warned him, he's my old stick buddy, that if he talks about me, I get the mic back at the end. So, Mr. Jeff White, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. No stranger to this community, he served 27 years as an Army aviation officer before hang on, man, my denture slipped. Before continuing service in multiple SES positions within the Army and the Office of the Secretary of the Army. Prior to assuming the current duties, he served as Vice President at Siemens Government Technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jeff White.
Thank you, General Mundt, for that kind introduction. It's great to be with all of you here again this year. I appreciate the opportunity to update you on Army acquisition. This is an exciting time for all of us. The theme for this year's summit is right on target, ready today, more lethal, and ready tomorrow. I brought a short video to introduce the topic. Get our blood going. Let's go ahead and roll it if you would.
Say woo!
All right. That wake you up? Okay, Army aviation came to age in the 20th century and changed the face of war. The critical role of Army aviation in worldwide missions continues to grow. We're incrementally modernizing the existing fleet while we're preparing for a competitive aviation advantage with the next generation of aircraft in the future. Slide. Let's take a look at the investment portfolio for the Army aviation over the FYDP, fiscal years 2020 to 2024. The Army will invest more than $24 billion in Army aviation. $6.6 billion is budgeted in research, development, test, and evaluation, and $17.5 billion in procurement. Here you see the system dollar percentage breakout. Just a few high points on this chart. Fixed wing, $51.8 million for fixed wing utility aircraft, primarily in communications, navigation, surveillance, and aircraft survivability. It provides modifications for about 20 legacy aircraft, and the rest of the money, about $387 million, goes to SEMA, airborne reconnaissance, low and enhanced medium altitude reconnaissance, and surveillance system, guardrail common sensor. In the Black Hawk, $4.7 billion buys you about 194 UH-60Ms. $1 billion converts 159 UH-60Ls to UH-60 Victors, along with the associated training equipment, publications, and fielding costs. In the Apache, $4.7 billion buys you 210 H-64E remanufactured aircraft with new airframes, upgrades to existing H-64 fleet to address obsolescence issues, and provides initial development of future H-64E upgrades to keep the system current and continued processor technology improvements. These investments align with our modernization focus to make soldiers and units more lethal, to win our nation's wars, and to come home safely. In addition, we're leveraging commercial innovation, cutting-edge S&T, prototyping, and warfighter feedback as we look to transition our modernization efforts to future vertical lift. In all our efforts, we intend to be accountable, transparent, and good stewards of the Army and taxpayer resources. We will ensure that time, money, and manpower deliver real value to the warfighter. Next slide, please. What I really want to talk to you about today, though, is how we're changing the face of acquisition to modernize ourselves and to move forward in the future. First and foremost in what we're doing is we need to reduce the requirement development process. You hear time and time again, if I only had a requirement, I could buy that product. If I only had a requirement, I could move faster. For too long, Army acquisition has stood aside from the requirements process. We've looked and said, that's somebody else's job, that's TRADOC, that's the Aviation Center. When I get a good requirement, I'll move out and I'll get something. That has to change. We are now looking at our PEOs and our PMs as a primary and integral part of the requirements process. Requirements do matter. Requirements are what drive what you ultimately fly. The PEOs and PMs need to be involved. They need to be able to understand the technology of what the warfighter is asking for and understand the capabilities of the industry that has to deliver it. A tighter integration between the PEOs and PMs in the requirements process renders a faster and more efficient requirements process and ultimately gives a good requirement that can be executed in a timely manner. We need to prototype early. We need to do more testing and learning, more technology demonstrations. We don't need a whole helicopter in order to prove out a rotor head, a landing gear assembly, or a control feature. We can take existing equipment, we can put on appliques of new technology, we can fly it, we can test it, we can get feedback, and then we can expand it to the force or to the new future vertical lift. We have to quickly develop our emerging capabilities to soldiers. How many of you out here has a mobile phone that's more than 2 years old? Probably not very many of you. We're never going to build a helicopter in 2 years, but we can't wait for 7 to 14 years either. We've got to build our equipment faster. We've got to deliver improvements to the warfighter more quickly. We need to look at things that we can do, such as introducing upgrades over the network, much like you get upgrades to your cell phone. We need to be able to deploy technology refreshes and upgrades faster and keep pace with the speed of innovation, not the speed of the industrial age. Finally, we need to improve collaboration with industry. And folks, those of you in industry in the room, I take this as a personal challenge and have for the last 18 months. We have to do this much, much better than we have in the past. We need our PEOs and PMs to be out there every day engaging with industry. We need to engage with industry inside of AL&T as well. I personally take about 3 industry engagements every single day in the Pentagon. I know our PEOs do many, many more times that, but if we don't talk to industry and if we don't understand your technologies, we are not going to be able to demand that you produce the equipment that our soldiers need. I encourage all of you out here in our audience to seek out the acquisition professionals that are here at this forum. There are over 50 acquisition professionals here. Find them, talk to them, tell them your concerns, and tell them your thoughts. Next slide. So how do we get to delivering things faster and more efficiently? One of the ways we're looking at it is to use OTAs or other transactional authorities. Many of you here know how those work. For those of you that don't, I'll simply say that this gives us the opportunity to use a non-FAR-based contract to go after non-traditional entrants and to go after technologies that we can't get to through normal processes. Additionally, even if it's well-known technology, it lets us move much, much more quickly by non-FAR-based contracting. We've used OTAs extensively in the aviation portfolio. PEO Aviation has awarded over $88.5 million in OTAs in the UAS, the Black Hawk, and the Apache fleet. So OTAs are out there. We're going to use them. They're a tool in our portfolio, and expect to see us use them more often, more frequently. Next slide. Middle tier acquisition. You hear a lot about this in the Pentagon these days, also known as Section 804 acquisition. It's a faster way to go after a FAR-based acquisition. What it allows you to do is skip those parts that you really don't need. So if you don't need a JSIDS document, if you already understand what the capability is that you have and it doesn't have applications to the Joint Force, you can skip the entire JSIDS process. That's a significant time savings. You can also expedite requirements. You can do things concurrently. We do have to notify Congress when we use it. However, the Army is leading the Department of Defense in the use of this tool. We currently have 8 programs that are under 804 authority, and we just signed 2 more last week. So expect to see more of the 804 process because we want to move quickly. It does have a downside, though. Things that we procure under the 804 process have to be generally fielded to the force in 5 years. So when we decide to do an 804, we have to have a good technology path forward. We have to be tightly wedded to our industry partners, and we need to understand how we're going to get that equipment delivered in a timely and appropriate fashion. If we don't use it appropriately, Congress will take it away from us, and we won't have it. Next slide. All right, one of the biggest things that we hear about from industry is intellectual property. The Army has led the Department of Defense by putting out an intellectual property policy, and we're busy putting out the implementing guidance for it now. I can't overstate how important intellectual property is for the Army and, of course, for you in industry, but even more so for those small and innovative companies that we're seeking to bring into the fold. Intellectual property is the lifeblood of these small, innovative companies. It's probably all they have. They don't bend metal, they don't make things, they own the thought process on how you would get to solving some of these very, very difficult problems. When we do our traditional FAR-based acquisition and we send out an RFI and say, tell me, everybody, how would you approach this problem and how would you solve it? And then we turn around and publish it to everybody. We scare away our small business partners. We don't get them to play in our acquisition processes and our acquisition requirements, and we need to do a better job at that. So to that end, we have put out a couple of key tenets in there. We need to better articulate our technical and software and data requirements and our rights intentions way up front, so everybody understands what we need and what our industry partners want to protect. Frankly, we don't need everything. If we're developing a box as an interface, we don't probably need to know how that box works. We need to understand what the input is and what the output is. How the box works is probably not something we need to understand. We need to understand that not all acquisition is the same, and data requirements and rights shouldn't be treated the same either. We need to develop customized strategies aligned to our needs. No longer is it appropriate to go out and simply ask for the IP for the entire piece of equipment or for the government purpose rights. We need to develop a tailored approach for each acquisition system. We must then implement creative and flexible approaches to IP, so we neither overpay nor stifle industry innovation. We find that we can leverage competition when we negotiate prices early, and that we can align with our industry partners so that they understand what we want and what we're willing to pay for it. Next slide. Advanced manufacturing or additive manufacturing. It's practically the phrase du jour. Every time I turn around, I get asked a question on what are we doing in additive manufacturing. Folks, I'm going to tell you additive manufacturing is already here. There are already many, many pieces in Army Aviation that are produced by advanced manufacturing. You're probably aware that many components of the turbine engine, including blades, are manufactured that way these days. We also have pieces of the H-64 transmission, ballistically tolerant fuel bladders, and ceramic composites, all in Army Aviation that are produced by advanced manufacturing. And we need to increase it because advanced manufacturing gives us advantages. When they're digitally manufactured and we can utilize the power of the digital twin, we can test and we can prototype and we can move out on future designs all digitally. But we've got to get this right, just like anything else. Advanced manufacturing isn't just the additive piece. It's not all just about 3D printing. It's also about the subtractive piece, or CNC machining, metal lathes, etc. We have to focus on what we can do and what is appropriate for us to do. I just use the analogy, we've heard these things and we've seen articles in the newspaper where some young crew chief go out in the desert miles away from anybody. An aircraft comes in and the pilot grounds it because he can't see the instruments anymore. The bracket on the windscreens come out and it's vibrating so badly he can't read it. Crew chief has a 3D printer. You can get them for about $300, $400 these days. He brought it out to the desert to play with. And he goes out, he figures out what that bracket looks like, prints a new one, bolts it in there, and he's a hero. Next day he goes out and tries to print a blade tip. Not such a good idea. We need to understand what it is that we can 3D print and what is appropriate to 3D print. We need to establish the library of instructions that allow us to take the machines that we're fielding out in the Army and give our commanders a library of the things that they should be printing. We also need to leverage it out in the future and understand where we can get the maximum bang for the buck. If you're out there in your helicopter, it's very unlikely that we're ever going to 3D print you a tail rotor. Maybe way out in the future we will, but not today. But if I could use advanced manufacturing techniques to get you every single pin and bolt and nut in that helicopter, think of the space you'd save in your basic load. Think of what you could do. And it wouldn't really particularly matter if each one of those bolts cost you $50 or $100. Just reducing the logistics tail in that alone would be a major, major innovation and save the Army billions of dollars in the long run. So advanced manufacturing is here is my message, and it's going to be a bigger and bigger part as we move forward. Next slide. Innovation is critical to all our efforts. It's been important throughout our military history. Everything from robotics, night vision goggles, air mobility, the internal combustion engine, wheeled and tracked vehicles, GPS, radar, internet, machine gun, freeze-drying technology, and even duct tape comes from innovation from the Department of Defense. The point is that continued innovation is important to our future and the success of our soldiers on the battlefield and in the battle space. Let's look at innovation through time on the following video. Thank you all for allowing me to join you today and again this year. I appreciate your time and attention, and I look forward to visiting with all of you for the next few days. All our PEOs and PMs are here, as I said, over 50. And if you see us out on the floor, please take the opportunity to grab us and tell us your concerns. Thank you again.
Well, thank you again for bringing an insightful acquisition update this morning, Jeff, and we look forward to seeing you out on the floor. Now, I have some announcements. This year, we have created an 850-plus seat Aviation Warfighter Theater downstairs in the exhibit hall, where all the leadership briefings will be held throughout the remainder of the day, beginning with the International Aviation Leaders Panel at 11:30. This will also be the location for all leadership briefings tomorrow, starting with the Army Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General James McConville, at 08:05 or 8:05 in the morning. As a reminder, the spouses are in the room. The spouses professional session, surprisingly simple, garden to table, will begin at 1300 in Delta Ballroom C, across from registration, with former Army aviator, renowned gardener and chef, and farmstead educator Jeff Ross. Remember, if you're looking to turn in or purchase tickets to either the Hall of Fame banquet tonight or tomorrow night's Soldier Appreciation Dinner concert, go to the Quad A Executive Services, see protocol upstairs in Canal A. Make sure, if you have a chance, to visit the Quad A Scholarship booth and consider making a tax-deductible donation. And finally, I would ask, if you're not a member of Quad A, please make sure you visit our membership booth and sign up today. Our goal is 20,000 members by the summit in 2020. I think we can reach that goal here. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to let the industry partners know that we have already sold almost half of the space for next year's convention, which is right back here in Nashville. So if you're interested, now's the time to talk to the exhibit space salespeople. And finally, the exhibit hall is now open. Have a great day, and I'll see you down on the floor.